If you enjoy these bedtime journeys, please follow and subscribe so you never miss the next dream. Settle in, dim the lights, and let your shoulders soften. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out even slower. Tonight we slip into a gentler world where kindness is the strongest kind of magic, and a simple ember of hope warms a whole home. Imagine a small manor at the edge of a sleeping village. The windows glow like little lanterns against the blue night. Somewhere inside, a kettle hums. A clock taps softly. Floorboards remember footsteps and keep them safe. We will move slowly. We will speak softly. Nothing here will rush or startle. You can drift whenever your eyes grow heavy, and the story will keep rocking like a boat in still water. In this world, chores whisper instead of clatter. Mice wear courage like a tiny coat. A garden can listen. And a girl with soot on her hands carries a bright, steady heart that refuses to dim. Picture the door. Old wood. Warm to the touch. When it opens, the air smells of tea leaves, baking bread, and linen that dried in honest sun. Inside, the fire has settled into a sleepy red. Sparks rise like slow fireflies and fade. On the mantel sits a row of simple things that used to belong to a mother and father who loved quietly and well. A ribbon. A smooth stone from a summer walk. A book with a pressed flower inside. These are not grand treasures, and yet they shine because of how they were held. Tonight we will not hurry to the palace. We will not hurry anywhere. We will stroll the rooms, learn their gentle sounds, and feel the patience of a heart that believes in better mornings. If you feel your breath matching the rhythm of the story, that is perfect. If you close your eyes and only listen, that is perfect too. The tale will keep its shape while you wander through sleep. Cinderella's story begins before the cinders, before soot and ash, before midnight and slippers made of light. It begins with quiet mornings, careful hands, and a promise to be kind, even when the world forgets how. Take another easy breath. Let your jaw loosen. Let your thoughts settle like snow in a glass globe. The village is quiet now. The moon pauses at the window. The kettle sighs. The first page turns. We step inside. Chapter 1. Before the Cinders. In the earliest hours, when the village roosters are only thinking about singing, the house is already awake. Not loud, not busy, just awake in the way a cat is awake, stretching in the sun. Curtains hold a pale glow, and the breeze smells like the garden, reminding the rooms that the day will be sweet. Cinderella moves through the light the way a small boat moves across calm water. She does not disturb the surface. She carries a basket of herbs that dry on a quiet hook, and a folded cloth that once belonged to her mother, soft from years of careful washings. Her father taught her the language of wood and hinge, how a door thanks you when you close it gently, how a cupboard sings when everything is in its right place. He was a man who spoke to roses and listened to sparrows. He laughed without making noise, shoulders shaking, eyes kind as warm bread. Her mother hummed the kind of lullabies that make walls remember. When they moved through the house together, they touched the tables and chair backs with gratitude, as if the furniture were friends doing their best. In that tenderness, the child learned a lesson that would follow her everywhere. When you handle the world kindly, the world often answers in kind. There is a small stool by the window where she used to sit to watch her mother stitch. The needle would pass in and out of a hem, while the story of the day wound itself into gentle talk. There were stories about the time the river froze in lace, about a fox that learned to bow, about the grate that whistles only when the wind is glad. Cinderella learned to stitch by watching the way her mother's hands moved. The secret was not speed or cleverness. It was listening. The fabric tells you what it wants to be. The thread shows you where it wants to lie. If you listen, your hands will know. Sometimes in the late afternoon, her father would take her to the garden. He would kneel by the beds like a knight greeting queens and kings. He would introduce the lettuces by their temperaments. This one likes shade. This one is brave in rain. He would lift a leaf and show the small sailors of dew riding the veins. He would say that patience is not waiting and nothing else. Patience is what you do while you wait. You water, you weed, you hum a small song, you notice new green. There were picnics on the floor when it rained because sometimes a little softness grows when you make a meadow out of a rug and a feast out of simple bread and jam. There were quiet celebrations for things that might not look like victories to strangers. A pie that did not crack. A night with no creaks from the stairs. A letter from a friend that took the long road and still arrived. The house learned to echo those small joys back, like the sound inside a seashell. It kept their warmth in the wood and sent it into the rooms when the air grew thin. The seasons walked by in their careful shoes. Autumn pressed apples into their hands, and the kitchen smelled like patience. Winter dusted the windows with frost ferns that looked like tiny forests of glass. In spring, the eaves belonged to birds who believed this home would keep them safe. Summer widened the daylight until evenings felt like extra gifts. Through all of it, the child grew into a girl who knew how to greet a morning and how to put a night to bed. When her mother fell ill, the house held its breath and tried to remember every lullaby. Cinderella kept the kettle ready and the pillows plump. She stroked a cool cloth smooth across a warm brow with fingers that learned how to say everything without words. The garden sent its mint, and the sun sent its gentlest beams. Sometimes love is arranging the chair just so. Sometimes love is the silence you keep beside a bed. Even after goodbye, the house kept the shape of that care. Even after goodbye, the lullabies stayed tucked in corners like folded quilts. Her father carried on with a smile that had a seam down the middle. He still spoke to the roses, and the roses still answered. He still told the sparrows the news, and the sparrows still tilted their heads. He told his daughter that grief is a room with a window. The window is small at first, but it lets in enough light to see the next step. And so they took steps. They polished the banister. They swept the hearth. They set an extra plate for memory. Some evenings they read aloud from the book with the pressed flower, and when the pressed flower finally crumbled, they kept the page open anyway. There came a season when the house saw new shoes at the threshold, new laughter with a sharper edge, new perfumes that came in glass bottles shaped like promises. The girl stood at the window seat and watched the lane without fear. Change is a guest that often shows up before the beds are made. You greet it. You ask what it needs. You keep your own heartbeat steady. Her father wanted company for the quiet and thought this might be the way. He believed in the good that can grow with care, and he hoped it would grow again. The new voices filled the air with a different kind of music. High notes that brushed the ceiling, footsteps that did not always love the floor they walked on. There were new ribbons on the stair posts and new rules about where to put your hands. There were neighbors dropping by to see the novelty of it all, and there were glances that weighed more than they should. Cinderella remembered the lessons in the thread and the garden. Listen first. Handle gently. Keep the kettle warm. If there is a hurt, move softly around it. If there is pride, give it space in a window. When her father's chair sat empty for the first time, the house did not know where to put the sound. Cinderella set the extra plate anyway. She lit a candle and placed it on the mantel near the ribbon, the stone, the book whose flower had returned to the air. She sat in the hush, and the hush sat with her, and together they learned the map of a heart that must keep beating even when it is tired. The mice, who had always lived here as tenants of good manners, came closer. They made tiny sounds like stitches. They kept her company in a language of crumbs and brave little nods. From then on, the rooms changed. Duties shifted. The day carried more work and less laughter that shook shoulders without sound. Yet the girl carried her quiet like a lantern. It did not glare or boast. It simply made a small circle of warmth wherever she stood. She rose early, before the roosters remembered their lines, and put the house back into its gentle rhythm. She would smooth the linens and hum a line of a lullaby the walls remembered. She would step into the garden and listen for her father in the way the mint breathed and the roses leaned toward morning. She would not call herself lonely. She would call herself listening to the way the banister missed being polished by grateful hands, listening to the way the stove puffed like a sleepy animal that still wants to be useful, listening to the way footsteps could sound like kindness if you let them. In that listening, she kept the home from hardening. She kept her heart from hardening. She made space for anyone who might want to be better today than they were yesterday, including herself. And because kindness notices the small, she noticed the small. A mouse that paused before a crumb as if asking permission. A bird that tapped the window with a polite hello. The way sunlight landed on the floorboards in stripes, like the pages of a book opening themselves. She found that when she whispered thank you, the house whispered back. When she asked the day to be gentle, the day tried. Before the cinders, before the ash, before the name the world would give her, there was a girl who held a quiet hearth inside her. It glowed when she remembered her mother's hands. It glowed when she tied her apron with a neat bow. It glowed when she stepped through a doorway, and the doorway seemed to stand taller. If you listened closely, you could hear it. Not a crackle, not a blaze, just the sound of a steady ember saying yes to another day. Outside, the lane kept its promise to be simple. A wheel rolled by. A child laughed 2 houses over and then yawned so wide it sounded like a song. The sky slid toward evening and then thought better of it, giving back another hour of pink. Cinderella set a dish of seeds on the sill, and the birds answered as if she had written them a letter. In this exchange, she learned again that love does not need trumpets. It needs a place to land. The day folded itself like a letter put away for safekeeping. She banked the fire. She swept one last sweep. She placed the kettle where morning could find it quickly. She pressed her palm against the door to feel the warmth that a home saves for those who touch it with care. And then, with all the rooms breathing the same slow breath, she whispered good night. The house whispered good night back. And the cinders were still only a word that had not learned her name. Chapter 2. The House of Many Rooms. Morning is gentle here because someone asks it to be. Long before the sky decides on a color, Cinderella lights a small lamp and the flame behaves like a well-mannered guest. She ties her hair with the ribbon that knows her hands. She slips her feet into slippers that remember her step. The stairs sigh a friendly greeting as she descends, and the banister enjoys its brief glide under a palm that always says thank you. In the kitchen, water greets the copper pot with a quiet drum. The kettle hums its way into warmth while she opens the shutters enough to let in a polite amount of dawn. She measures flour with a care that feels like prayer, even though she does not call it that. She calls it breakfast. The oven answers in puffs. On the table, she lays a cloth so clean that Morning notices and decides to behave. She slices apples so thin you can almost see the sun through them and sprinkles a little sweetness like a promise kept. Chores are not punishments in this hour. They are conversations. The broom remembers the path it took yesterday and takes it again, whispering over the boards like a soft brush over a painting. The duster enjoys its cloud ballet and settles each bit of the world where it belongs. The bucket waits like a loyal friend, and the cloth rings out clean as a sigh. Her rhythm never rushes. Sweep, fold, place, breathe. In her hands, routine becomes a lullaby. The house hums back to her. The house of many rooms likes to be noticed room by room. She starts with the parlor where chairs sit like patient ants. She straightens a cushion that is slumped in its duties, and it perks up as if to say, I meant to do that. She polishes the little mirror that keeps an eye on the mantel, and the mirror, now clear, blinks a happy blink. The clock receives a dusting with straight-backed pride, then ticks its approval. On the mantel, the ribbon and stone and book are undisturbed, and she greets them as you greet dear friends who keep watch while you sleep. In the hall, the runner feels its edges smoothed. The runner has a secret life of dreams about grand balls, but for now it is content to guide footsteps kindly and to cushion wandering feet that have yet to learn their way. Cinderella kneels to align it just so, and the runner feels seen. She notices a loose thread and tucks it back with a whisper. Not yet. Stay a while. The thread agrees. She enters the linen closet as if entering a chapel. The scent is sun. The stacks sit with quiet dignity. Towels folded to the same width look like a chorus, and sheets folded flat look like pages ready for a story. She places her hand on the topmost stack and thanks it for its service, then tucks a sprig of lavender between piles as a small, fragrant medal. When she closes the door, the closet glows in the dark, remembering it has been loved. Upstairs, the windows enjoy their washing. She wipes away the sleep from the panes, and the world outside becomes newly crisp. The garden curtsies, the lane bows, the sky opens its eyes wider. Windows are the house's eyes, her father used to say. They do not want to look at the world through dust. She polishes until the glass becomes a near idea, more light than surface. And then she steps back to admire the way morning pours in as if invited. On the landing, a spill of buttons has somehow escaped a drawer. Buttons like to roll. That is their way. She kneels and gathers them one by one, rescuing a pearl that pretends to be shy, telling a wooden button that it is braver than it knows, scooping a metal one that will guard a coat with a perfect seriousness. She sets them in a small tin that clicks closed and hums. Every tool has a home. Every small thing deserves a safe place to rest. She pauses by a door that sticks a little in damp weather. It is not the door's fault. She presses her ear against the wood and listens to its patient complaint. Later, when the kettle is not busy, she will bring oil and a cloth and speak kindly to the hinges. She will remind them that doors are not arguments. Doors are boundaries that love to be respected. They will agree with a relieved groan, and the hall will breathe out. In the sewing room, the light always feels like afternoon, even in the morning. She sets spools in a gentle rainbow and runs her fingertip along the threads without snag. The needlebook opens like a tiny meadow and shows its shining sprigs. Today there is mending, a hem that will be happier when it sits still, a seam that wants to hold hands tighter. She threads the needle on the first try, the way you do when the day trusts you, and she begins. In and out, in and out. The stitch is small. The stitch is steadfast. The fabric relaxes into the certainty that it will not have to do its work alone. Downstairs again, she opens the back door to let the world say its morning hello. The birds hold a brief conversation about seeds. The cat that belongs to no one and everyone strolls by with an air of professional detachment and allows a gentle scratch under the chin. The garden is pleased to have its edges noticed. She pinches back a bit of basil and promises soup later. She checks the rain barrel and murmurs approval at its full heart. She scatters crumbs on the step, and the mice, who have impeccable timing, appear as if they had been waiting behind the hinges. These are not ordinary mice, though any true mouse is already extraordinary. They are small citizens of a republic of care. They pay rent in bravery and good company. They take messages by night and bring back stories of the pantry's politics and the cellar's myths. Cinderella greets them with the respect due to friends who carry the world in their whiskers. She breaks a crust into mouse-sized feasts and watches as they sit politely to eat. "Good morning, Jock," she whispers. "Good morning, Gus," she adds, handing him the largest crumb as a kind of crown. They nod gravely, grateful for their breakfast and the way she never forgets their names. The day lengthens, and with it the list. But the list is a friendly one because it has been written with compassion. Clean the parlor rug, air the quilts, beat the dust from the hall runner, wipe the banister until it shines like a promise. When she carries the quilts to the line, the clothespins click like tiny applause. The breeze tests the stitches and finds them strong. The sun touches the quilts with warm hands. Later, when she brings them in, they will smell like the sky, and sleep will come quicker because of it. When the market cart passes, she exchanges a wave and a few coins for flour and salt, and a handful of carrots so vivid the afternoon blinks. The carrots tell her about their morning underground. The miller's boy tells her about a new litter of kittens. She tells them both to take care and mean it. She saves 1 coin because saving 1 coin is an art in itself. Back in the kitchen, she lines the carrots like orange soldiers and thanks them for their service. The pot accepts them with a comforting plunk. Not every sound is sweet. A sharp voice may pass through the air like a cold draft. A command may try to turn work into weight. When that happens, Cinderella tightens her apron string and replies in a voice made of tea and patience. "Yes, of course. Right away." She does not let the noise inside her. She lets it slide off like rain off a well-waxed boot. It is not denial, it is stewardship. She cares for the room of her own heart the way she cares for the rooms of the house. She dusts thoughts that do not need to stay. She opens a window for feelings that need fresh air. She polishes a memory until it shines enough to be useful again. By late afternoon, the house is content, and the house shows it. The stairs do not complain. The lamps light without smoke. The kettle sings in tune. She lays the table for supper with a cloth whose pattern looks like a story about vines learning to curl politely. The plates are simple, but they sit with dignity. She sets an extra spoon at the end of the table because it is a habit she is not ready to break, and because it makes the room kinder. Habit can be a small prayer. Between tasks, she checks the little library her father began. The books have their own weather. Some smell like dust and rain. Some smell like apples. Some remember a specific afternoon when a laugh fell between their pages and never quite left. She straightens the spines and pauses at the one with the pressed flower that is no longer there. The page still remembers. She closes the book gently and returns it to its place. Later, perhaps, she will read a paragraph aloud to the room just to hear how words make furniture stand taller. When evening settles, she walks the circuit of lamps to trim the wicks. She believes in the discipline of small flames. A lamp trimmed at the right hour rewards you with steady light and good sleep. The shadows that remain are friendly ones. They pool in corners like cats and keep watch. She leaves the kitchen with everything ready for the morning. The pot is cleaned and resting. The kettle is filled and eager. The bread is wrapped and dreaming of toast. Before bed, she steps outside once more. The garden has changed costumes. Where morning wore dew, evening wears perfume. The stars have pinned themselves carefully to the sky. She does not need wishes that burn bright and fast. She prefers the kind that warm slowly and stay. She thanks the day and forgives it for any rough edges. She forgives herself for any small stumbles. She forgives the voices that did not remember how to be kind. Forgiveness, like mending, keeps the fabric from tearing further. Back inside, she climbs the stairs with feet that know exactly where to place their weight. The runner hums approval. The railing shines in the lamplight. At her door, she pauses to listen to the house breathe. In, out, in, out. She opens the window a finger width to let the night say good night, and the night is courteous. She sets a cup of water where her morning hand will find it without searching. She lowers the lamp, and the room gathers close. The house of many rooms does not feel big when it is loved. It feels like a handful of small, faithful places stitched together by footsteps that remember. Cinderella slips into bed and pulls the quilt over her shoulders. The quilt smells like sky and patience in a line full of afternoon wind. Her eyes grow heavy. The clock ticks as if counting sheep with exquisite care. Somewhere in the walls, the mice discuss tomorrow's adventures and end every sentence with a yawn. She thinks of her mother's hands and her father's garden. She thinks of the broom's soft whisper and the way a window smiles when it is clear. She thinks of how each task makes space for the next moment to be easier for someone, even if that someone is only the day itself. And as sleep begins to braid itself into her breath, she thinks a simple thought that holds her like a promise. Work can be heavy, but kindness makes it light. The house hears her think it, and the house agrees. Chapter 3. Friends under the eaves. Morning slips along the rafters, and the rafters tell the eaves, and the eaves tell the little tenants who live there that the day has arrived with soft feet. Cinderella opens the window just enough for the world to pass a note. Birdsong flutters in, folded neatly. On the sill she sets a saucer with crumbs and a thimble of water, and the smallest guests of the house begin their polite parade. Jock appears first, whiskers prim and mission-minded, as if he has already written 3 lists and checked them twice. He taps the sill, looks up to meet her gaze, and bows the way a brave little friend bows to a queen of kindness. "Good morning," she says, as if she has a crown too, though hers is made of patience and a ribbon that knows her name. Gus arrives next. With a heart that is somehow bigger than his paws, he tries to carry 2 crumbs at once, finds both dear, and decides, after thinking hard, to eat one and save one for later. "This is wisdom," Cinderella tells him with a smile. They are not alone. The eaves have their own neighborhood map. A pair of swallows who never skip their morning stretch. A wren who knows 1,000 songs that all sound like home. A sensible sparrow who inspects the line of quilts, as if approving official banners for a comfortable kingdom. They do not fear her hands. They recognize them. The hands that stitch a hymn without a single complaint will also hold a crumb as if it were treasure, and return a tiny friend to the floor after a fall with the ceremony of a parade. Today there is mending and a bit of making. On the work table, a button tin shines like a round moon. She peels back the lid, and the little metal and pearl planets roll gently. From the basket comes a tangle of thread in happy colors. A length of ribbon waits on her wrist. The mice watch as she measures out scraps, not leftovers, but beginnings, and snips small coats that will fit small shoulders. Jack puffs his chest as she offers him a jacket with tidy stitches. Gus spins in place when a vest button with a single heroic bead is held up to him like a medal. "Stand tall," she whispers, and they do. She ties the tiniest scarf you have ever seen, and somehow the room feels more important, as if a parliament has assembled. There are tasks to divide and errands to carry, and the smallest citizens volunteer first. Jock will reconnoiter the pantry politics. Gus will ensure the route from sill to floor is safe and roll any stray spools back to base. The birds promise aerial patrol with a side of cheerful commentary. Between chores, Cinderella teaches a quiet lesson. How to carry something with both hands and not drop it. How to wait your turn at the saucer. How to share a crumb with someone who arrived late and looks tired. The mice learn quickly because kindness makes remembering easy. When she threads her needle, they hush. When the needle finishes its path, they cheer in whispers. When a seam sighs happily, they look at one another with the pride of a job well watched. In the hush of late morning, she places a folded handkerchief like a picnic blanket on the table and sets out a feast sized to fit their bravery. Oat flakes, a lick of honey, crumbs from a heel of bread that tastes like Sunday. The birds land on the back of a chair and, with impeccable manners, sing a grace so soft it feels like light. Stories pass around like cups of tea. Jack reports that the pantry is at peace and the sugar jar is secure. Gus confesses he tried to move a grape and the grape won, then adds that he will try again tomorrow because courage is a thing you practice. Cinderella nods, seals his pledge with a pat, and tells them both of a book in the library that has a pressed leaf which looks like a hand waving hello across time. Everyone agrees that books are full of polite ghosts who only want to help. When the sun climbs, she carries a basket of mending to the sill so the eaves can supervise. She stitches while the mice nap with crumbs still in their paws, and the birds tuck their heads into their wings like folded letters. The thread goes in and out. The house breathes in and out. In this rhythm, an ordinary day becomes a lullaby that remembers itself. By afternoon, the little garments are finished. She smooths them as if smoothing each small heart inside them. Jack tries his on and looks less like a mouse and more like a good idea. Gus buttons his vest and declares, by way of a solemn nod, that he will walk the long way around the table, just because the world is big and worth seeing. Cinderella laughs quietly and opens the window a fraction wider so the whole blue sky can agree. When evening leans in, she returns everyone to their usual places. Birds to the eaves, mice to the baseboards, and gaps they consider front doors. She leaves a tiny crumb trail like a row of lanterns so that no one has to wonder which turn to take. Before she sleeps, she whispers a promise that the house already knows. No friend is too small to be seen. No kindness is too small to count. The eaves, grateful and fed, creak with the contentment of a full choir, and the night nods back. Chapter 4. A Letter with a Golden Seal. The day begins with the ordinary splendor of steam, bread, and a broom that hums its favorite path. It decides, halfway through a sunbeam, to become a day that will be remembered when people say, "Do you recall where you stood?" Cinderella stands at the kitchen table, setting a cup just so on a saucer, when the knock arrives. 3 careful raps, like a polite drum roll. At the door, a royal courier with boots that have learned to bow and a satchel that gleams from a life of messages. He presents an envelope the color of cream, heavy and proper, sealed with wax that bears the familiar crest of the kingdom. Crown, laurel, a cluster of stars. The seal is perfect, the kind that suggests the sender trusts what is inside to behave. She thanks the courier, offers him water and a slice of apple, and he accepts with the gratitude of a man who has walked all morning. When the door closes and the steps fade, the envelope rests on her palms as if listening. She does not tear, she does not rush. She finds the letter opener, her father's, and glides it under the edge as if parting curtains for the sun. The parchment emerges with the rustle of grand announcements and gentle promises. Letters bend into words that have crossed the kingdom, an invitation to a royal ball, to be held in the palace whose windows catches the evening like a net full of stars. All eligible hearts, the letter says maidens, but hearts understands better, are invited to join in an evening of music and light, so that the prince might meet his people and his future with grace. She reads it twice, then a third time, meaning it differently each time. For her, the letter is not a trumpet. It is a candle set in a window. She does not imagine loudly. She imagines softly. Chandeliers like captured moonlight, musicians who never hurry a single note, a floor that allows for small steps and big hearts. She thinks of the palace library and wonders if the books sleep near the music or smile at it from rooms of their own. Word travels. Houses are good at sharing news through walls, and kitchens move gossip as if it were spice. Voices climb and echo. Plans are made in bursts and flurries. Fabrics are considered like weather. The afternoon fills with a certain bright flutter. Amid it all, Cinderella does what she has always done. She keeps the kettle warm. She makes lists that make sense. She checks the clock with a look that says, "We have time." In a quiet hour between errands, she allows her own wish to breathe. It is so gentle a wish that it does not disturb the dust in the attic where it sits. She would like to see the palace, only see it, to stand beneath a chandelier and learn its language of light, to hear the strings as if they were telling a bedtime story to the walls, to watch the skirts of dancers move like calm water. She would like to be part of a night that glows without burning. She does not say this out loud. Wishes can be shy. She carries her small wish with her as she polishes the good candlesticks and chooses the ribbon that will make another's dress feel like a field of wildflowers. She steams a hem, smooths a wrinkle, and the wrinkle decides to behave. She lays out hairpins like a tiny fence and tells them kindly that they are guardians tonight and must not go missing. They agree with a metallic nod. When the sun changes its mind and slides toward evening, the letter sits on the mantel, still beautiful, as if an invitation can light a room by itself. Cinderella passes it, touches the edge like a hand on a shoulder, and thanks it for arriving. She knows that letters are bridges and bridges are meant for going over, but she also knows that sometimes seeing a bridge is already a kind of crossing. In the good-night quiet, she stands at the open window and lets the cool air write soft thoughts across her mind. Music will drift on the streets on the appointed night. Even those who do not attend will hear it. The ball will be many things to many people. To her, it is a sentence made of 3 words that sit happily next to one another: music and light. She smiles as if in answer to something the moon has said, and the letter gleams on the mantel like a promise learning to unfold. Chapter 5. Stitches at Sunset. The day chooses thread and calls itself ready. Cinderella opens the sewing box. Its lid remembers her touch and lifts with quiet pride. Inside, spools that carry sunsets, twilight, and the soft cream of old lullabies, needles that rest like silver reeds, a cushion plump with pins that look like patient stars. She lays fabric across the table the way you spread a map you intend to follow slowly. This is not a dress of show, it is a dress of story. She gathers pieces that keep memory, lace from her mother's collar, a pale ribbon that once circled a gift, a small cluster of beads saved from a winter holiday that tasted like cinnamon. In the doorway, the light softens as if to say, "I will be a lamp for you while you work." She sketches with chalk. The line flows because the idea understands itself. A neckline that sits like a kind thought. Sleeves that remember to be comfortable. A skirt that moves the way a river moves, when it knows the stones beneath and trusts them. The chalk whispers in little snows. The fabric answers with a contented hush. She hums, not a song she knows, but the melody that appears whenever hands and heart agree. Jack and Gus arrive to consult. They stand on the edge of the table in their excellent coats and look like foremen of a very polite workshop. Jack checks the tape measure as if it were a compass heading. Gus volunteers to fetch the button tin, but returns with the entire button tin, having argued successfully with gravity on the way. They try on scraps and pose with an air of authority, and Cinderella confers with them as if they were the leading experts in their field. It turns out they are. She cuts on the breath out so the line is steady. She pins on the breath in so every point finds its place. She stitches on the second breath out, and the thread follows like a good sentence that says exactly what it means. Outside, the day leans toward gold. Inside, the work leans toward grace. Every seam is a promise made in quiet, and the fabric keeps those promises gladly. There is a pause for tea served in the cup with a hairline crack that looks like a smile that has learned something. The crack is not a flaw, it is a story. The mice have thimble sips, then curl up in the fold of the skirt-to-be and nap as if they are already traveling in it. When the kettle sighs, she returns to the task with a patience that does not tire. Good work is like walking a friend home. You do not hurry, and you do not stop before the door. By late afternoon, the shape of the dress reveals itself. It is not grand, not the kind that brags. It will not carry the room on its shoulders. It will carry Cinderella the way a kind hand carries yours when streets are crowded. She fastens the borrowed lace at the collar and beads at the waistline that wink when light makes a joke. She lines the bodice so that the inside is as gentle as the outside looks. She adds tiny stitches where only she will ever see them, love notes in thread. The eaves choir reconvenes. Birds whistle approval from the rafters. Jack nods as if signing off the final plans. Gus spins once and only once, because discipline is noble, then leans against a spool and sighs with contentment so complete it sounds like a poem. She lifts the dress in both hands, not to display it, but to thank it for arriving. Out of scraps, memory, and time, something new has appeared that contains all three. She hangs it by the window where the last light tries it on and admires itself. It is not a crown, it is a lantern. Evening enters politely. She packs away the pins, returns the needles to their meadow, and ties the ribbon back around the tin. She smooths the table with her palm the way you smooth a forehead that has stopped worrying. At the window, she watches the town slide toward supper, and the sky show off its pale blues and pale pinks like folded handkerchiefs. When she turns back, the dress is there, resting, ready. The room has that rare feeling of a task, completed so truly that even the dust seems pleased. She breathes it in, linen, thread, a hint of lavender from the linen closet, and for a quiet moment she allows herself to imagine a night where music touches her shoulder and says, "Come along." Not for cleverness, not for spectacle, just for joy. She nods to no one in particular, and to the day in general. And the stitches keep their promises, holding fast as sunset gently closes its eyes. Chapter 6. A Tear on Velvet. Some days end on a full note. Some end on a rest. This one pauses. The house holds a hush you can lean on. Cinderella readies the room for tomorrow's brightness. She lays out the hairpins like a small constellation, places the shoes beneath the chair as if tucking them in, and checks the hem once more for any stitch that might feel shy in company. Then the draft arrives, the kind that does not come from a window. A sharpness moves through the air like cold rain that forgot to be water. Voices rise, not with music, but with the clatter that happens when hurry forgets grace. Eyes land on the dress, not to admire, but to measure and to weigh. What comes next in many tellings is a storm. Here it is a wind that pulls too hard. Hands that do not know the language of thread make quick work of undoing what patience has done. Ribbons are tugged. Lace is treated as if it were only lace, not memory, and beads, which prefer to be winks of light, are made to scatter like frightened birds. The room, which has loved every stitch, flinches. Cinderella stands still, not frozen, but listening, because listening is her way through most things. She breathes the way one does during a sudden rain. In, out, wait. When the air clears, the silence is not empty. It is full of what just happened. On the chair, velvet that remembers being whole, lace that recalls laughter, a ribbon lying quiet with the dignity of a ribbon that has done its best. And on Cinderella's cheek, because cheeks are honest, a single tear, hot, heavy, and then gone. It lands and leaves a darker circle where it fell, like a moon that visited and moved on. This is the part where a heart could harden. Hers doesn't. It softens further, not out of weakness, but out of practice. She kneels to gather what can be gathered. She touches the lace as if apologizing to a friend who knows it is not her fault. She collects the beads, every small light, and returns them to the tin where they can rest and tell one another their stories until a new plan finds them. Jack and Gus appear at either elbow, unofficial ambassadors from the Republic of Tiny Comforts. Jack pats her finger with both paws, the way a captain might touch the shoulder of a soldier and say, "You are seen." Gus brings a crumb because, when you do not know what to do, offering food is a fine first step. Cinderella breathes in, looks at them both, and thanks them with a smile that still works. She does not pretend it is nothing. She names it quietly, this hurt, this loss of an evening she had begun to imagine. Naming is not the same as dwelling. Naming is what you do to give a feeling a chair instead of making it stand at the door. She sits with it as the room regains its breath. Outside, night has put on its slow glitter. Somewhere in the distance, a clock says a number that does not matter yet. When she stands, it is not to fix what cannot be fixed in this moment. It is to open the window a little wider and let the cool air come in and fetch the heaviness as if it were a coat someone forgot. She lights the smallest lamp and sets it near the gathered lace. A small light, she knows, is not a brag, it is a hand to hold. If hope were noisy, it would be out of place here. But hope is a quiet creature that sits itself on the step and waits to be noticed. She sees it out of the corner of her eye, a steadiness that has nothing to do with plans. Kindness has made her strong. Work has made her capable. Loss has made her deep. Somewhere in the larger map of the night, the road bends. She thanks the room for keeping her safe while the air was sharp. She thanks the mice for their steadfastness and the lace for its years of beauty. She thanks the day for being honest, even when it was hard. And when she says good night to the window, the night says good night back. And something kind, just out of sight, seems to be listening. Chapter 7. Where wishes are heard. Some nights are content to be night. Others feel like doorways. This one waits, attentive like a friend who has pulled up a chair. Cinderella tidies without pretending her heart is not sore. She lays the ribbon straight, not because it changes the past, but because straightening is the language her hands speak when they comfort. The lamp flame is steady. The window air is sweet, with a hint of herb and starlight. Somewhere a cricket writes a poem in one note. "Dear goodness," she whispers, not to ask for anything grand, but to let the room know she is here and ready for whatever gentleness the world might still provide. The wish she makes is small enough to fit in a teacup, to be seen for who she is, to be allowed one evening of light that doesn't ask her to explain. She does not expect an answer. She expects only the good that comes from telling the truth to the air. The air answers, not with thunder or trumpets, but with a soft brightening, as if the lamp had sighed and decided to share its secret with the walls. A presence gathers, shaped like reassurance. The shadow in the corner remembers it is only a shadow and steps aside. From the calm arrives a woman whose smile has known every season and approved of them all. She does not knock. She does not need to. She stands where the room has made space for her and looks at Cinderella the way a grandmother looks at a baby, and a queen looks at a knight, and a candle looks at a wick, ready to light what is already there. "Child," she says, and the word is a warm shawl placed around cold shoulders. "You have done good work. Let's do the rest together." Cinderella does not tumble into speeches. She nods because relief can be shy. The woman's eyes find the gathered lace, the tin of beads, the ribbon placed like a line drawn with kindness. She smiles more, which seems impossible until it happens. "Nothing is wasted," she murmurs, and every small thing in the room sits up a little taller. What follows is magic, but not the kind that startles. It is the sort that behaves like a good guest. The woman, call her fairy, call her godmother, call her good news in a sensible cloak, moves her hand slowly through the air, and where it passes, patience becomes transformation. Outside on the step waits a pumpkin with a good heart. It becomes a carriage the color of a warm moon, its doors promising, not just arrival but return. Mice straighten their jackets and find themselves brave enough to wear harness bells. Lizards, those unassuming guardians of porches, volunteer for footman duty and stand suddenly taller. A gray horse who has loved the lane learns what it is to wear the night like a proud blanket. For Cinderella, who has always been ready to be herself, the gown appears not as a disguise, but as a greeting. Threads of starlight stitch themselves into a bodice that feels like being understood. A skirt unfurls that moves when she breathes and rests when she rests. Around her feet, something clear and shimmering shapes itself into slippers that ring like the quietest chime when they kiss the floor. She looks down and laughs, not at the beauty, though it is beautiful, but at the kindness, the thought of details. "Midnight," says the godmother, with the fairness of one who believes rules are there to keep tenderness safe. "The spell will fade with the old day, but nothing good you learn tonight will be lost." She touches Cinderella's cheek where the tear had traveled, as if pinning the lesson there like a brooch. "And you, my dear, will go as you are." Cinderella nods again, the way a person nods at a truth they have long suspected. She turns once, slowly, to let the dress and the air agree on their friendship. The mice salute, looking both important and very much themselves. The carriage door opens, as if the night were holding it. Thank you," she tells the room, because the room has always helped. She thanks the godmother with her eyes because gratitude does not always need words. She steps to the threshold, every step a sentence that ends in yes. The night beyond is wide and welcoming. And the wish that asked only to be heard is answered with a path of light. Chapter 8. Carriage through starlight. The carriage moves the way a lullaby moves, gently forward with a promise to bring you back. Wheels whisper along the lane. Hooves make punctuation marks that say only good things. Lanterns hang at each corner and carry small suns into the dark, not to conquer it, but to be its friends. Inside, the cushion remembers stories told by travelers and offers them as comfort. Cinderella sits with her hands open on her knees, the gown settling around her like calm water. Through the window, she watches the village show her its nighttime face. Bakers covering loaves with cloth that look like soft clouds. A cat on a wall, demonstrating the art of balance. Windows reading their books of lamplight. She nods to each as one nods to neighbors who have kept one's secrets kindly. The road leaves the houses and chooses hedgerows and fields. The sky opens fully, revealing that it has been busy with stars all along. Constellations arrange themselves into familiar patterns and then, for a moment, into new ones. Shapes that look like needles, spools, tiny coats, a kettle that sings. The moon takes a breath and brightens just enough to see the path better. Night creatures pause their important errands to watch the carriage pass, then resume them with a little extra pride. Inside, the godmother's words hum like a melody you don't need to remember because they remember you. Go as you are. Nothing good you learn will be lost. Midnight as boundary, not cliff. The slippers chime, once when she shifts, again when she settles, sounding like the promise that you can be both strong and soft, and the world will hear you. And the mice. Now coachmen and footmen with hearts still mouse-big do their work with absolute attention. Jack holds the reins with the competence of a sailor meeting a friendly sea. Gus in his uniform looks as if he has always been in charge of joy. They exchange glances now and then, amazed and not amazed, the way friends are when their belief in one another becomes a visible thing. Trees arch over the road like cathedral ribs. The leaves hold their breath and then exhale as the carriage passes, sprinkling the air with the scent of green. A stream keeps pace briefly, telling the carriage what it has seen. A family of ducks asleep like a row of commas. A pebble shining in the moonlight like a pearl that belongs to the earth. A bridge that carries footsteps with secret pride. The carriage listens because listening is what has brought it here. As the land begins to tilt toward the city, the first hints of the palace glow touch the horizon. Not a blaze, never that, but a concentration of gentle light, like many candles agreeing. Towers sketch their outlines against the sky. The music, still far away, travels better than most things and arrives early, laying itself across the fields so the wheat can sway in time. Cinderella breathes in the way one does before entering a room where kindness will be tested, and, she hopes, rewarded. She does not practice lines. She does not rehearse a smile. She trusts the person she has carried through every room of her life, herself with soot on her hands and steadiness in her chest. The dress is beautiful because it matches this. Closer now. The gates, open and watchful. The guards, alert and polite. The stone, old and willing to meet new footsteps. The carriage slows of its own accord as if it, too, wants to savor the arrival. The footman hops down, lightly, bravely, and swings the door as if presenting a stage to its star. Jack tips his cap with a flourish. Gus grins that grin that says, "You've got this," even though he has never said those words in his life. Cinderella takes a moment, neither long nor short, and places it in her pocket. A moment to be used when the room feels too high or the music too rare. She steps down. The slippers touch palace stone and make that delicate sound again, a chime like a decision being made without hurry. Ahead, archways traced in gold, balconies with flower boxes that nod like friendly neighbors, chandeliers doing their moonlight impression to perfection. The night air is a good host, cool enough to refresh, warm enough to welcome. Somewhere a clock moves its hands, but time is willing to be kind for now. She lifts her eyes and meets the shape of the evening. And the evening, as if recognizing a long-awaited guest, smiles back and opens its arms. Chapter 9. The ball unfolds like silk. Music meets her at the threshold like a kindly usher and shows her where to place her breath. The ballroom is not ablaze. It is a lake of light holding stars that came indoors to rest. Chandeliers lift their small suns with quiet pride. Candles stand at attention, steady as good thoughts. Floors shine with the practiced grace of hosts who have learned how to welcome every footfall as if it were a friend arriving late and forgiven early. Cinderella steps in, and the room does not gasp. It simply agrees. Dresses rustle in a language made of gardens and moonlight. Gentle voices shape polite weather. A quartet of strings stitches a wide, soft blanket of sound and tucks it around the evening. She walks at the pace of a heartbeat that knows its work, unhurried, sure. And every step says, I am here as myself on purpose. Faces turn, not in judgment, in curiosity born of kindness. Some eyes find the shimmer at her feet and smile at the thoughtfulness of glass that chose to be shoes. Some admire the way her gown moves like a steady breath. Most of all, the room notices what rooms always notice when they are paying attention. The person inside the dress, the light inside the person. The prince stands not at the center, but where a good host stands, between people, making small bridges with sentences and more with listening. He carries his crown lightly, like a lantern meant to show the way rather than the wearer. When he looks up, it's not for spectacle. He is searching for the same thing the music is searching for, a rhythm that feels like home. They see each other. There is no thunderclap, only recognition, as simple as the moment you find your place in a book again without a bookmark. He bows with a warmth that does not burn. She curtsies with a steadiness that does not sway. Good evening, he says, as if those two words could carry all that matters. Good evening, she answers. And they decide, without saying so, to share the next few measures of music. They begin to dance. Not the sort of dancing that insists, the kind that invites. He leads like a question. She follows like an answer that keeps the conversation open. The floor learns their names through the soles of their shoes and promises to remember. Around them, the ballroom tilts toward joy, quiet, present, unmistakable. People make room the way water makes room for a dropped leaf, easily welcoming the ripple. They talk as they turn, sentences measured to the tempo. He asks about simple things, favorite mornings, good books. What soup tastes like when it is made by someone who loves you. She tells him about a kettle that sings and a garden that listens and a house that became many rooms of courage. He nods as if she has given him a map to a country he would like very much to visit. When she asks about his days, he speaks not of rule, but of stewardship, not of orders, but of care. He tells her he walks the palace corridors before dawn to hear how the stone is feeling, and visits the kitchens to thank the hands that make breakfast sound like home. The music turns a page and finds another song. They follow without losing their place. A small child, allowed to stay up past bedtime for the sake of wonder, watches with eyes wide and the very serious duty of memorizing everything for later. An older couple, keepers of long love, sways near a column, agreeing with their feet that some dances are for remembering their first. Cinderella is not dazzled. She is seen. The prince is not bewitched. He is met. Around them, laughter threads through the air like silver. Now and then they pause at the edges to sip something cool and talk with others. She listens. He listens. The room relaxes into its best self. When the orchestra rests, the night itself seems to hum the melody so it won't be lost. They step onto a balcony where the palace shares its view of rooftops, sleeping like folded quilts. The gardens are pocket mirrors catching moonlight. Somewhere far below, fountains practice their whispered conversations. The prince asks nothing that would break the spell of gentleness. Cinderella says nothing that would make the moment hurry. "Thank you for the music," she says, and means more than the song. "Thank you for coming as you are," he replies, and means more than the gown. They return inside when the strings begin again, trusting the evening to hold them the way it has held everyone, softly, safely, with room to breathe. And for a while longer, they dance as if the floor itself is a promise kept. Chapter 10. The Clock Remembers. Clocks are caretakers of time, not tyrants when they are treated kindly. The palace clock has watched many evenings bloom and fold. It knows when to clear its throat, when to let laughter run past midnight, and when to tap gently on a shoulder like a friend who hates to interrupt but must. As new music unfurls, the minute hand touches a memory and sends it through the air. Midnight is coming, as midnight always does. Cinderella feels the reminder before she hears it. The godmother's fairness was clear, a boundary drawn to keep the magic tender. She smiles up at the prince in a way that says, "Thank you for this music, this ease, this recognition." And he receives the message with a nod that says the same. They complete the measure they are in, the way one finishes a sentence even when the next room is calling. The first chime is a soft bell wrapped in velvet. She curtsies. "Forgive me," she says. "I must go." Not dramatic, not apologetic, simply true. The prince, who has been listening all evening, hears the truth and respects it. "May I walk you to the stairs?" he asks. He may, and so he does. They pass faces that will remember them fondly. A musician who noticed their steps were kinder than most. A doorkeeper who appreciates good timing. A servant carrying a tray who will later tell the kitchen the story in a way that makes everyone's hands move happily. At the top of the stairs, the night lifts its cool hands and holds them over the scene like a blessing. The clock continues. 2, 3, each note a bead on a string, none sharper than necessary. Cinderella dips her head, gratitude in every angle. "Thank you for the music," she repeats. And then she is moving, not in alarm, but in certainty, the way a tide returns to the sea because that is its nature. On the steps, the slippers make their delicate chime, the one that sounds like a decision already made. The gown keeps pace, light as breath. At the gate, the carriage door opens as if it had been waiting with a story to tell. The mice salute. The footmen square their shoulders. The horse stamps once and considers the road a friend. Behind her, the prince does not shout. He does not chase. He places the movement they shared where it belongs, in the heart's careful keeping. Still, he steps to the balustrade to extend his view, and as he does, the light catches on something at the stair. A slipper, clear as a promise, rests on the stone as though it has paused to consider where it will do the most good. The final chime speaks, and then the night settles. The carriage moves into the darker part of the garden where magic prefers to work unseen. The dress, with perfect manners, returns what it borrowed from the stars. The mice, proud and small again, keep their posts with equal dignity. Cinderella holds the night in her hands as if it were wool to be spun into mourning. When she reaches home, she steps inside the house that knows how to welcome her in any costume, cinders, silk, or simple. She sets a hand against the door. "Thank you," she tells the air. Her other hand holds one slipper, bright as thought. She places it in the shoebox of safe things beside ribbon, stone, book. The clock in her own hall ticks approval. Outside in the palace, a young man stands with a single shoe in his palm, not as trophy, but as compass. And time, pleased with how politely it was handled, goes on keeping steady watch. Chapter 11, A Glass Thread Left Behind. Morning finds two houses considering the same idea from different sides of the kingdom. In one, a prince studies a slipper small enough to carry an evening's worth of meaning. In the other, a girl studies its twin and feels the same quiet certainty. Objects sometimes become sentences when they are placed in the right hands. At the palace, the decision is not fanfare. It is simply a plan, a tour of the realm, not to search for perfection, but to recognize a fit that tells the truth. Messengers carry news the way bees carry summer. The proclamation is written without flourish, then written again to soften any edges. Every eligible heart is invited to try the shoe. The steward reads it aloud to ensure the words walk correctly. Satisfied, he bows to the day. Down streets and along lanes, the idea moves like warm weather. Shop doors discuss it with their bells. Laundry lines nod in approval, proud of the clean shirts they have already prepared for such announcements. Children act out the trying on with shoes made of imagination and laughter. Kitchens bake as if guests will stop by. They will. Even clocks tick a little brighter, as if pleased to be part of such a sensible enterprise. Cinderella hears without leaning toward hope or away from it. She polishes the table for the pleasure of the shine. She bakes a loaf in which the crust crackles like small applause. She checks the hinges that sometimes complain and tells them kindly that the day may bring visitors. Jake straightens his jacket for no reason, other than that days like this enjoy a bit of ceremony. Gus carries a crumb as if it were a royal gift because, in his world, it is. She does not speak of slippers. She does not avoid the thought either. She leaves it on the mantel, like the letter that once warmed the room. When work calls, she goes. When the window brightens, she pauses to let her eyes rest in the light. Meanwhile, the prince's party begins its steady, respectful tour. They do not thunder. They arrive. They greet each home like a small country. The steward asks first after health, then after news, then after shoes. At each stop, there is a chair placed near a window for the trying. A cushion prepared as if it were waiting all its life for a foot to thank it. A picture of something cool to make conversation kinder. People laugh at themselves with good humor when the slipper sighs no. They clap softly when it says maybe. In every place, the prince listens for the sound of truth, the gentle chime he remembers from the steps. By afternoon, the party turns toward a lane lined with trees that know the shape of seasons by heart. They approach the house of many rooms. Inside, the broom is behaving, the kettle is amiable, and the heart of the house is steady. The knock on the door is music performed properly. Cinderella answers, not because she expects anything, but because she welcomes everything. The steward introduces the purpose like a guest of honor. A chair, already neat, is invited to assist. Slippers elsewhere have been stubborn as stories. This one will be what it will be. Tryings are made, polite attempts that end in friendly shrugs. The room fills with the warmth that happens when a community participates in a ritual. Grown-ups serious, children delighted, furniture pleased to be needed. From the landing, the clock clears its throat, as if to say, remember the attic. And the house, which remembers everything that matters, does. Chapter 12. Shoes, steps, and doorbells. News and footsteps travel together. The steward's courteous entourage brings both. The chair by the window continues its loyal duty. The slipper on velvet waits with the calm of a truth that does not need to hurry. Try-ons proceed. Hopeful foot, careful lowering, a pause full of maybe, then a smile and a shake of the head. The steward thanks each heart for its courage to try. The prince thanks each spirit for its welcome. In rooms nearby, air changes by a degree only a listener like Cinderella would notice. The door at the top of the stairs, sometimes sticky in damp weather, sits too closed. From behind it, the faintest scuffle, like the sound of a thought trying to become a plan. Cinderella, bearing a tray toward the guests with cups that do not rattle, hears the sound the way a bell hears another bell ring in the distance. She does not set the tray down quickly. She sets it down right. Guests first, courtesy intact. Then she goes quietly up. The attic keeps small promises. A beam of light across the floor like a lane. Dust that behaves itself. A keyhole with a patient eye. "I hear you," she tells the door, though it has said nothing. Behind her, the mice arrive with the purposeful gait of heroes who would prefer not to boast. Jack points. There the key, hung where hands taller than theirs would not notice it. Gus nods. There the path, up the curtain, along the rod, over the beam, down the cord. "We can," says Jack, meaning all of them. "We will," says Gus, meaning it with his whole round heart. Cinderella kneels and offers her palm as a platform. They climb with the ceremony of boarding a ship they themselves built. The birds, who have maintained air patrol for days, slip through the window with the grace of messengers bearing news, 2 quick chirps, then they take positions as lookouts. The climb is not peril, it is precision. The spool becomes a stepping stone, a ribbon, a mapped river. They haul themselves along with button rope and pin grapples, inventions hatched during breakfast over crumbs and courage. Jack reaches the key first and finds it heavier than plans often are. He steadies. Gus arrives, plants his feet, and together they ease the metal treasure off its hook. Downward now, hand to hand, whisker to whisker, a chain of small strength carrying a large promise. Cinderella waits with patience that looks like stillness and feels like prayer. When they lower the key into her waiting hand, she thanks them with a smile that places medals on their jackets better than any ribbon could. The lock, long deprived of oil but rich in good intentions, turns. The door understands and opens. Steps down the stairs. Not the clatter of conquest, relief in gentle shoes. The house exhales. Below, the steward lifts the slipper again, and the room straightens its shoulders, sensing a moment arriving right on time. Chapter 13, The Quietest Room. Attics and kitchens share a talent. They know how to keep secrets until the right ears are ready. When Cinderella steps from the stair into the light where the slipper rests, the house does not cheer. It composes itself. The steward looks up. The prince turns, recognizing not the gown from the ball, but the way the air shifts when somebody beloved has entered it. "May I?" Cinderella asks, hands folded, voice steady as tea. The steward bows, placing the slipper on its velvet as if placing the moon on a cloud. The chair beside the window braces its legs with pride. The cushion smooths itself without help. She sits. She breathes. She lets the room remember the night. Music that walked rather than ran. Steps that listened to each other. A balcony where silence spoke fluently. Then she lifts her foot, and the slipper, which has been waiting to keep a promise it was made for, welcomes her without hesitation. Not a squeeze, not a struggle. A fit that feels less like success and more like recognition. The sound that follows is not applause. It is the smallest chime, the same delicate note her shoes sang on palace stone. The steward hears it behind his eyes. The prince hears it under his ribs. Jack hears it in his whiskers. Gus hears it in his grin. The birds, posted by the eaves, trill one courteous bar and then hush, as if to avoid startling fate. There is a breath where everyone remembers their manners. Then the steward, who has served many days and loves best the ones that end in truth, smiles so gently that the room answers with warmth. The prince steps forward, not to claim, but to stand alongside. "Good morning," he says, because beginnings should always be greeted properly. "Good morning," she replies, and the simple words lay down a carpet, the color of relief. Someone, perhaps the steward, perhaps the day itself, asks whether she has the other slipper. She does. She rises, crosses to the mantel, where safe things rest, the ribbon, the stone, the book, the shoe, and brings it to the circle where a kingdom's small miracle is unfolding like a well-folded napkin. She sets it beside its mate. The pair look as if they have been together forever, which, in a way, they have. The house, having kept steady through sorrow, work, and hope, permits itself a tiny thrill along the banister. In the kitchen, the kettle hums a note of approval, though no one lit the flame. Upstairs, a door that once stuck opens and shuts, just to enjoy how easy it has become. The steward clears his throat to bring the moment into proper order. He begins, and then chooses better. "My friends, would you join us at the palace?" The words are an invitation, but sound like a blessing. The prince offers his arm not as ceremony only, but as camaraderie. Cinderella accepts with the same grace she offered the mop, the needle, the guests, the night. Before she leaves, she looks around, at the chair that did its duty, at the window that watched, at the friends who changed a key's mind. "Thank you," she says to each. And each, in its way, says you're welcome. The door opens, the day widens, and the steps that follow are the kind that remember every step that came before. Chapter 14. Jock and Gus are brave. Celebrations do not belong only to palaces. They belong to creatures who kept faith with small jobs on large days. As the party prepares to leave, the house holds a quick, quiet festival of its own. Jock stands taller than his inches and receives a crumb the size of a crown. Gus, whose courage has always outpaced his balance, bows with the dignity of a statesman and pockets 2 sunflower seeds for the road, as if he were about to found a new nation. Cinderella kneels to speak on the level where true things like to be said. "You carried a key," she tells them. "But really, you carried a hope." Jock straightens his jacket in the way of a soldier formally accepting gratitude. Gus pats his vest pocket where the seeds wait and nods as if sworn to future good deeds. The birds, supervising from the eaves, fluff their feathers and agree that courage comes in all sizes and most often wears a plain coat. The steward, who has seen many kinds of bravery, notices this counsel and tips his head to it. The prince, who pays attention, asks the names of his smallest allies and learns them carefully. "Thank you, Jock," he says, pronouncing it precisely. "Thank you, Gus. Titles are fine things, but names are better. A carriage waits, this one made not of pumpkins, but of carpenter's hours and the pride of palace coachmen." Before she steps inside, Cinderella takes a last circuit of the rooms that taught her how to be herself. She pauses at the sewing table and smooths an invisible wrinkle that isn't there. She checks the lamp wicks, though evening is far away. In the doorway, she places her hand flat against the wood that has felt her come and go. "Look after one another," she tells the house, and the house, which knows its duty, settles happily into obedience. Jock and Gus escort her as far as the threshold, where they stop in the way of friends who know that every story has places where you cannot follow with your feet, but can follow with your heart. "Back soon," says Jock, who has already begun the minutes until reunion. "Save some crumbs," adds Gus, which is his way of saying the same thing. She smiles, not promising details, promising presence. The door closes sweetly. The stairs, who have climbed and carried so many days, relax. The window watches the lane while pretending not to. The kettle, unable to help itself, warms slightly just in case. Outside, the carriage door opens, a hand is offered, and Cinderella climbs in beside a future that feels like a continuation rather than a departure. The prince takes the seat opposite. The steward settles with his papers, and the driver flicks the reins like a poet, writing a line he has long waited to write. As the wheels begin to turn, Jock salutes like a commander at a parade. Gus throws his 2 seeds in the air, catches neither, finds both, and laughs until he nearly falls over. The birds launch into a brief chorus and then return to their business of watching roofs. Bravery, like love, makes itself at home where it is needed. Today it has plenty of places to rest. Chapter 15. The Slipper's Song. The palace receives them with the hospitality of stone that has learned how to be warm. Doors open like books to favorite chapters. Corridors remember the sound of last night's music and hum the refrain under their breath. Servants, who are the true historians of any great house, exchange glances that say, "The tale we've hoped for is keeping its best manners." In the great hall, not the ballroom, but the room where words are placed into the air and allowed to become law when they are kind enough, the steward prepares the simple ceremony that will satisfy those who prefer signatures to songs. A cushion is ready. The slipper, its twin now happily alongside, rests as if sitting for a portrait. The prince stands where princes stand when they are about to become partners. Cinderella does not look smaller here. She looks exactly herself, hands sure, eyes steady, breath slow enough to calm clocks. She takes the chair offered. The chair enjoys being useful. The steward speaks the necessary phrases with a cadence that respects both ink and heart. When the time comes, she lifts her foot, and the slipper, which has waited through kitchens and corridors for this moment, settles once more with that same clear chime that sounds like a bell very far away, realizing it has a twin. There is a stir at the edge of the room, an intake of breath that is not surprise so much as relief. The sound of truth finding its place. The prince closes his eyes for a fraction of a beat, the way one does when a prayer is answered, and you don't want to scare it by looking too quickly. When he opens them, the steward is offering a register. Cinderella signs in a hand taught by a mother's lists and a father's notes for the garden. Neat, modest, confident. Then the quiet part ends and the joyful part begins. Not with trumpets, though trumpets are available and behave themselves, but with the low, beautiful thunder of feet moving to prepare welcome. A kitchen becomes a festival. A courtyard considers lanterns and then decides on many. Musicians warm their instruments like bakers warming ovens. The city, hearing news through the clever latticework of human talk, dresses its windows and makes extra soup. Before celebration swells, there is a pause carved out for the 2 people at the heart of it. They walk the terrace where the night had earlier introduced them to the idea that shared silence is a language. Sun brushes stone. Breezes carry stories from the river and leave them tidily rolled at the parapet like scrolls. I would like to help, Cinderella says, not in the vague way of someone dazzled, but in the specific way of someone who knows how rooms become homes. There is much to do, he answers with the relief of someone who has wanted to say so and finally can. They make first plans, small ones, like how to ensure the laundresses have shoes that don't slip on wet floors. Large ones, like visiting every kitchen in the city to taste and thank. He tells her about roofs that need repair before next winter. She tells him about doors that stick and what a little oil can teach a hinge about ease. They are still themselves, only now in company. Below, laughter prepares its softest version. Above, the sky, utterly pleased with the arrangement, stays clear a while longer. And somewhere in a box on a mantel in a house of many rooms, 2 empty spaces gleam where slippers once rested, as if the shelves themselves are smiling at their good work. Chapter 16. A New Dawn in the Palace. Home, she says aloud the first morning she wakes, in rooms that have known many queens and are ready to know another. The word fits. It fits because she does not ask the palace to become something else. She asks it to be itself, only kinder. The bed sighs with contentment. The curtains yawn politely. Floors stretch in the way wood stretches when it anticipates a day of friendly footsteps. She keeps her old rhythm, and the new one bows to it. Before the light chooses color, she slips on soft shoes and walks the quiet corridors, the way one inspects a ship before a voyage. Lamps still glow like thoughtful stars. She trims a wick with the satisfaction of a habit that has not been taken from her. She touches the banister, and the wood, surprised to be greeted by name, warms under her palm. In the kitchens, the day is already humming. She asks after wrists and backs, after ovens and deliveries. She learns which knife has a temper, and which kettle likes to sing off-key. She tastes a spoonful of porridge and declares it perfect, then suggests a pinch of cinnamon just to remind the morning it is loved. The cook, a general in an apron, nods once, high praise in a language of economy, and the pinch is added. A boy washing bowls looks up, meets her eyes, and in that first exchange learns he will be seen here. By 8, she has open windows that were waiting for someone to notice their latches, read the day's lists, and added 2 more. New mats for the scullery entrance, a visit to the city bakery that keeps its bread racks like soldiers. She meets the head gardener among the espaliered pears and asks to be taught how the palace trees prefer their haircuts. The gardener, who has not been surprised in years, finds himself smiling at the prospect. Together with the prince, she begins the gentle work of widening the circle. A palace gate is meant to keep out harm, not humility, so the gates open more often. A bell is hung that anyone may ring if they need a loaf, a blanket, a listening ear. It rings, yes, but less than one might fear, because word travels faster than want when kindness is well organized. In the city, kitchens share recipes. In the halls, footmen share news of who might need a second pair of socks. There are also gardens to restore. She kneels beside the beds with the same reverence she brought to the linen closet. She thanks the soil for bearing with neglect. She asks the roses where they would like to reach next and then ties them to trellises with strips of the cloth that once lined a drawer and now will hold up blooms. She plants herbs for soup and herbs for comfort and herbs that do both jobs at once. The gardeners who love anyone who talks to plants adopt her immediately. In the afternoon, she visits the library, the quiet heart of any fair kingdom. She inventories with the librarian. Which spines are tired, which stories have been thumbed thin by love, which pages need mending like hems. She starts a corner for children, low shelves with baskets to make decisions easy. She orders more picture books about ordinary heroes, bakers, weavers, neighbors, who keep keys for one another. A day each week becomes open house. Musicians play sleepy tunes in the entry hall. Benches appear as if they were always meant to be there. Tea and bread turn strangers into guests. The prince walks among them with sleeves rolled, literally to the shock of 2 minor courtiers and the delight of everyone else, learning names the way good rulers learn rivers and roads. At sundown, lanterns are lit through the grounds in a line that feels like a sentence the whole city can read. You are welcome, you are safe, you are seen. The light reaches the river, and the river, in gratitude, reflects it double, so boats traveling late can find their way without worry. Cinderella keeps one promise especially, to the smallest friends who made everything possible. A corner of the palace courtyard becomes a paradise for mice. Tiny arches in the stone where they may pass. A little seed house that looks suspiciously like a palace in miniature. a no-cat policy slyly enforced by bowls of cream set elsewhere. Birds not to be ignored receive a row of houses painted in dignified colors. On the plaque, "Friends under the eaves." Sometimes late, she returns to the balcony where a quiet evening changed direction. The city glows like a hearth. The prince joins her with the confident silence of someone who understands why people come outside at night, to remember their place is both small and beloved. They speak of tomorrow's tasks and next year's dreams, children's clinics, roofs in need of care, a festival at harvest that celebrates ordinary work with extraordinary joy. He takes her hand, not because she needs leading, because hands like to be held when the world is large. "Thank you," he says, with the ongoing astonishment of a man who knows luck when it arrives in work clothes. "Thank you," she answers, with the practical gratitude of a woman who knows happiness is not a trophy, but a practice. Below them, the last lantern is lit. Above them, the first star agrees. Chapter 17. Little wonders continue. Happily ever after is only ever a day at a time, and the days are good. She keeps her morning rounds, kitchens, gardens, corridors. People begin to time their questions to her passing the way. Flowers open when the sun reaches their part of the wall. She likes practical puzzles best. How to make the laundry courtyard drain faster after rain. Which route brings hot bread to the infirmary before it cools. Solutions arrive because she asks the right people and listens to the answers. On market days, she trades the palace gate for the market gate and greets old vendors who treated her like a person when life tried to treat her like a shadow. The apple seller insists on a bag of the sweet ones for your mice, and she takes them laughing because, yes. The cobbler shows her a new sole that doesn't slip on wet stone, and she buys 20 pairs for the scullery staff because if you have ever mopped a floor, you understand. Gifts like this can be love letters. Children learn quickly that the palace green is open in the hour before supper. They come with pebbles to skip and jokes to test and pockets full of complicated treasures, feathers, bent nails, lucky strings. She keeps a tin in her apron labeled "Important," and she means it. She asks them to read aloud the labels they invent for their collections because names matter. They leave straighter than they came. She visits the house of many rooms, not as a queen inspecting holdings, but as a daughter visiting a place that taught her how to be herself. The door recognizes her and swings wide. The stair speaks in the old accent of wood loved well. In the kitchen, she lays her palm on the table, and the grain thrums welcome. Jock and Gus appear from the molding with the pomp of magistrates. There are crumbs. There is news. There is a ceremony in which 2 sunflower seeds are presented and eaten immediately. She walks each room and thanks it for its service, then leaves with a bundle of her old linens to be pressed and put to work in the palace, where they will teach new shelves how to hold kindly. Letters come from beyond the city now, carried by couriers who travel with better stories since the ball. One is from a girl who keeps hens and hopes to start a school for proper bread-making. Cinderella sends back a note full of measurements and encouragement, and coins earned by saving from somewhere else. Another letter is from a mason whose joints ache. She arranges for a softer schedule and a young apprentice to learn his secrets before he retires. The kingdom feels less like a crown and more like a quilt, many pieces stitched patiently, warming everyone under it. On a spring afternoon, she invites the laundresses to the rose garden with the extravagant purpose of doing nothing for an hour. They keep looking around for the trap, a pile of sheets appearing, a bucket demanding. But no, it is only tea and shade and the sound of bees minding their own golden business. They practice resting, Feels like learning a new stitch. They are good at it by the end. The prince, who was raised to speak with dukes and diplomats, discovers that he loves talking with blacksmiths about temper and tinkers, about repairs that ought to be cheap. He and Cinderella agree that any rule they make must pass two tests. Does it make someone's daily life softer? Does it teach the powerful how to carry power as if it were a sleeping child? Laws written that way keep their shape. Evenings have their rituals, music in the West Hall that children can fall asleep to without being shushed. Reading hours where anyone who wants to practice letters may do so with cookies nearby as an incentive disguised as hospitality. Slow walks where couples teach each other the day in the language of nods and hands. And still she sews, not gowns for show. Curtains for hospital windows so light can be polite. Aprons that fit bodies that do real work. A set of tiny jackets and vests restitched every season, which will be hung in a miniature wardrobe in a miniature courtyard entrance, labeled with names that make certain hearts beat happily. She mends what tears and reinforces what will carry weight. She keeps a needle ready for days when the world's hem looks a little frayed. Sometimes in the lamplit hush, she thinks of her mother's hands, her father's garden, the broom's whisper, the kettle's song. She thinks of how every small thing she learned became the spine of a life. She whispers a thank you to each memory and feels the answer turn in the air like a page. Little wonders continue because they are given room to do so, and the kingdom, contented, sleeps better for it. Chapter 18. Candlelit, good night. Even the busiest palace understands bedtime. Lamps dim in the right order, like constellations realizing it is time to let stars have the stage. Corridors exhale. Kitchens settle their pans like blankets. Gardens fold their scents and leave only the soft ones drifting. Rose, mint, the green note of watered paths. Cinderella makes a last round, not to check, to bless. She pauses in the entry hall where music sometimes lingers and listens until the silence is clean. She steps into the courtyard and looks up. The moon has chosen a shape that suits the evening, gentle enough. She thanks the sky for its attendance. She thanks the stones for their patience. She thanks the day for its work and herself for hers. In the small courtyard where the tiny arches are, she sets a saucer and a thimble and watches as Jack and Gus arrive with the gravity of officials and the joy of friends. Sleep well, she tells them. Dream crumbs, Gus replies, inventing a blessing that should be used more often. The birds rustle in their dignified houses and offer a bar of song so soft it can only be heard by those who need it. Back inside, she passes the library. A child asleep on a cushion is carried by a footman with the expertise of a man who has carried nieces and goats and therefore fears nothing. She follows and opens a door before he reaches it, and he nods, and the world is made easier by two people doing one thing together. At her chamber, the curtains breathe. She opens the window a handspan and invites the night to be a guest. From this high place, the city looks like a chorus of candles, keeping faith with darkness. Somewhere a mother hums. Somewhere a baker begins early. Somewhere a hinge receives a drop of oil and learns how to be gracious again. She unties the day, ribbon off, shoes placed side by side, hands washed in a bowl where the water tells her it is pleased to have been useful. She leaves her gown on a chair that understands the honor. She folds herself into bed and the quilt climbs her shoulders like a cat promises to keep watch. The prince joins her with the careful quiet of a man who knows how to keep someone else's dreams untroubled. They speak the last sentences, a plan for tomorrow's distribution, an idea about the harvest festival, a memory of a child's joke that was not very good, but entirely perfect. "Good night," he says. "Good night," she says. It is both ritual and truth. For you, listening now, this is the place where you may let go. The house of many rooms will keep its steady breath. The palace will tend its lamps. The mice will stand their tiny watch, and the birds will fold the sky and put it safely away till morning. You are safe. You are home. You are loved. If sleep comes now, the story will carry you gently, like a carriage that knows every turn and never jostles. The candle on the bedside table does its final work. The flame lowers itself the way a singer bows at the end of a quiet song. It leaves the smallest ribbon of smoke, sweet, tidy, and then nothing but the memory of light. Night, satisfied, closes the door softly behind you, and the dream begins.